what you're saying is exactly right. Franklin Roosevelt said it would never be taxed. You could never use the Social Security number as an ID, ever. Well, that all got shuffled under. Maybe that's why we should have a constitutional convention. You see how I did that? Mark Meckler is the president of Convention of States Action. He'd like to see that happen. Mark, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Steve, how are you?
A lot of concerns out there for people, right? And a Convention of States, which I used to be not a fan of. Well, Mark, I've warmed up to it over time. As you know, I've become more of a believer in what you're doing. So tell the folks what you're doing.
Look, the idea of calling a convention of states isn't something new. It's in the Constitution. Article 5 gives us the power as citizens working through our states to call a state-based convention to propose amendments to the Constitution to restrain the federal government. Your last caller mentioned something. We've now breached what Roosevelt said Social Security was going to be about and how it would work. The federal government is not going to change it the way she wanted. She's not going to get the ear of Congress because they don't want to give up control of that. They don't want to give us our money back. We can do that by calling a convention of states and imposing that restriction on the federal government through an amendment. So it's a great example of why we need a convention of states, things like that and a balanced budget amendment, term limits, spending caps. These are all things we can impose on the federal government that they will never impose on themselves.
You're exactly right. So the concern that people have and that I had was once you open up a convention like that, everything's on the table. And if the numbers aren't right, and I mean those in attendance that are voting on it, whatever it is, I could lose the Second Amendment. That's a concern people have. Why should that not be a concern for me?
Well, 38 states have to ratify anything that comes out of convention. Second Amendment's a great example. There are 29 states with constitutional permitless carry, 24 states where you can carry your handgun in the state legislature, 14 states where you could actually bring an AR into the legislature and sit in the gallery. I don't recommend that, but you can do that. The idea that you could get 38 states to ratify, that's just ridiculous. And in fact, I can't find anything that I wouldn't like that I can list the 38 states that would ratify. I've made that offer to millions of people. Nobody's ever been able to come up with an amendment they really wouldn't like, you or I wouldn't like, that 38 states would ratify.
So to be clear then, Mark, just so I understand this, let's say you come out of a convention of states with 5 new amendments, right? You've got one on Social Security, you've got one on term limits, you got one on a balanced budget, just as an example. They could ratify one, they could ratify a balanced budget, 38 states, but not ratify term limits, for example. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's correct. If you use the Bill of Rights as an example, it wasn't called the Bill of Rights when it was issued. Didn't come out of convention, it came out of Congress, but there were 12 of those. Only 10 were ratified and became what we now know of as the Bill of Rights.
What were the other 2? I guess that's news to me, and I'm pretty good at this stuff. I never knew that.
Yeah, I think the most interesting one got ratified in the 1990s, early 90s. That's the 27th Amendment. And that was preventing Congress from increasing their own pay during a session. In other words, 27 said if Congress wants to increase their pay, the increase takes place in the next seated session, preventing them from sort of lining their own pockets during a given session.
But it didn't make it.
Well, it didn't make it until 93. It was finally ratified.
There you go. All right. I'm going to have to go look up the other 2 of the Bill of Rights that didn't make it. How close are you now? How many states do you have that say, yes, let's do this?
It takes 34 states to call, and so far we just hit 20 with Kansas being our last state. We're halfway through in North Carolina right now. The House has passed it, but not the Senate, so we should be at 21 here pretty quickly. And then Ohio, I think, is also going to pop through here pretty quickly before the end of the year. That would take us to 22 out of 34, so we're well on our way.
So here's my thing. There's a couple things that come to mind for me. I would like to protect the Electoral College. I think that's incredibly important. I think that these folks that are trying to do this, what do they call this deal where they've got the states and they do the popular vote coalition or whatever.
National popular vote, yeah.
Yeah, that thing. That should not be legal, right? It should not be. Because me sitting in Michigan with California cheating in their elections, which they do, let's not lie about it. California cheats in some other places, and they count people in the census, and that's something else that should be in there. Only American citizens to be counted in the census. There's so many good ideas that could be put out there that I think many states would agree with, right?
Yeah, look, I think you're nailing a lot of the important and what I would describe as the easy ones. And that's important. You've got to be able to get something ratified. and that takes 38 states. So, for example, the idea that only legal citizens should be counted in the census is immensely popular. That's a 75 to 80% issue. You should have that as an amendment. We should take the SAVE Act and turn that into an amendment. Congress isn't going to pass it. I don't believe the Senate's going to pass that. And so we should just ensconce that in the Constitution. Everybody believes you should have to show an ID to vote, and only citizens should be allowed to vote.
Agreed. And if you vote as a non-citizen or are some reason prevented or prohibited, you should pay a hefty price for that. I think most people agree with that. All right, with 22 states, Mark, what's your timeline? I only got about a minute here. So what's your timeline to get to 34?
Yeah, I think there's two paths. One is, I think, the natural timeline, 6 to 7 years. Trump has already come out in support. If the administration starts more actively supporting, I think we could get it done before Trump ends his presidency.
Wow, that would be remarkable. Mark Meckler, like I said, I didn't used to be supportive, but I have become warm to the idea. Mark, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate you.
See, I'm a convert. I'm a convert because I look at what's going on and I think, look, man, we got to do something different around here.